We're going to be tackling education here shortly, but there was a recent event that, me and Richie kind of wanted to talk about is, gripping everyone right now. It's the United Healthcare CEO being shot. It's kind of on everyone's mind right now, and, we wanted to get into, some of the nooks and crannies of it. So, any opening thoughts, Richie?
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of people cheering on the shooter on social media. Bit of a concern, I think. I know there's some arguments going around that it's a justified shooting. I personally don't think so in this case. I don't think it's a good idea to be cheering on a shooter online on social media where there's a bunch of people who are impressionable and just basically kind of encouraging violence. I'm not a fan of that, especially from big name figures. But at the same time, I 100% agree. The healthcare system is all screwed up. So I think there's definitely some things to be discussed about reforming the system, but I'm not a fan of the way this guy went about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you can never really in a healthy society have, vigilante murderers running around, people taking the law into their own hands is, never a sign of a healthy, prosperous society, right? So then, the reason this discussion becomes interesting, right, it is the fact that, clearly there are problems, right? The support that we're seeing for the shooter in certain circles of the internet, I've seen a lot of it, right? Tons of memes like, that guy was having dinner with me, like he couldn't have even been there, right? Stuff like that. It's kind of a sign that, a lot of people agree that this system is broken, right? It's kind of a result from the system that like this shouldn't happen, right? Like a lot of people will agree that vigilante murders should not happen. But then the question then becomes like, why is it happening? And why is there so much seeming support for it online?
Yeah, and I mean, I think partially yes, and I do think it could be a sign that the healthcare system is broken. But I would say we don't really need a sign of that. We've got plenty of signs of that. We've known that. Everyone knows that. I think the cheering on for the murderer. I mean, I don't see any difference between this guy and a terrorist. Basically, it's an act of terrorism in a way. It's a murder in cold blood to someone who, I mean, sure you can be mad at the healthcare system, but this is one man who is
Right.
just doing his job,
I
and even if he was the evil guy behind the thing, it's like that's not the way to do it. I think all the people cheering him on. I think it's a bigger sign that our social fabric is broken. It might be even more than just the healthcare system. It seems
yeah.
like there is a deep down rage. There's a want for chaos and violence, and it could
Yes.
go beyond the healthcare system.
I think it absolutely does go beyond the healthcare system, right? I think there is deep societal unrest right now. And this is just one fountain of that spewing out, right? It's not that everyone is so mad about the healthcare system all of a sudden, right? It's a problem. Yes, like we should address ways to fix it, but it's like a sign of the times, right? It's definitely a part of what's going on right now.
Yeah, agreed. And you also wonder how many of the accounts you see online are doing it with an intent to push more chaos, push more
And then
violence,
we
which is
have to go
probably the
back
biggest fear.
into, like the Russian bot farms and, like propaganda, right? Like this is just more fuel for the fire for, these sorts of deals. It's just spreading, mistrust in the system essentially is what this things like this are accomplishing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And looking at the guys, Luigi, looking at his profiles and stuff, it does look like he had a little bit of inspiration from the Unabomber.
Yeah,
He had
he
written about
definitely
him,
did.
and
Yeah.
that's another case where do I think that like the Unabomber is a guy where, and I don't know too much about him, but looking at some documentaries and seeing a little bit, he seemed to be kind of right. The things he was talking about were right. I think the way he went about gaining the attention, not get it that's in no world is that the best way to do it. I don't think when you're
Right.
killing innocent people, it's one thing. I've seen a lot of people talking about how I've seen some of these big name reporters, Taylor Lorenz, on the news saying, well, that CEO. Brian Thompson, I think his name was. He deserved it because he murdered all these other people, and it's like he didn't really murder them though. You know, for one, he as an individual didn't have anything to do with, like, he's played a small part in a bad system that failed to save these people. But it's not like, this health insurance company was poisoning all of their water for the last year and causing them to die. It's an imperfect system, definitely a corrupt system. But to say that's the same as murdering a bunch of people, therefore it's justified to murder him, I think that's just logically flawed. I don't think that
Yeah,
makes any
yeah,
sense.
like that dude is part of a broken system. That man is not the grand architect behind why so many people are being failed to have healthcare coverage, right? Did he play a part in some of bad practices? Yes, sure, maybe, right? Does that justify killing that guy? No, right? Is,
Right.
it's like how you have to look at it. Now, going back to like the Unabomber, right? Like that kind of leads us into, a little bit of the more philosophical side of like violent versus non-violent protests, right? Like, we said during our Halloween special, one of the things I remember you asking is like, well, what the hell are like these protesters in the street doing? Like what does that ever accomplish, right? And that's why you have people probably, mentally unwell to some degree who then realize this and say, all right, I guess violence is the way to accomplish this, right? And that's, like the Unabomber, like this guy certainly has like speaking on like his like medical manifesto that's going around, right? Uh they're trying to get their idea out, but they're doing it in probably not the right way, right?
What do you think is more effective? I mean, I think, obviously,
And
if
we're
violence
talking
was the
about it.
only
Here's
way,
here's here's the issue, Richie, is we're talking about it now.
that's true. That's true. But we're talking
How
about
how,
it
how are we
in a
going to say
bad
that
light. I
that's
mean, we
not an effective way of like spreading a
well,
message when
I don't know. I mean, I could. It's definitely an effective way of getting people talking about it. That's for
yeah,
sure. But me and you have talked about the healthcare system 3 or 4 times in
right.
12 episodes, and that, that's something that we enjoy talking about, and we can, discuss. But I would say, for the average person who doesn't know anything about it, not interested in it, doesn't care, it's you know, is it maybe even shedding his point in a bad light? Like, it seems like this guy was a very smart guy, valedictorian. Would there have been a better way to get his message across rather than, because now, I mean, he's the bad
Right,
guy in most
that
people's
that's
eyes,
that's the question. That's the question is if this guy just, tried to essentially do what me and you are doing, we get what like 40 views on our YouTube videos, trying to do this the right way. If this guy had just stuck to like the basic plan, would anyone have ever heard of his ideas?
Right. Yeah, fair point. It's a way of getting attention, but I mean that's kind of like, it reminds me of the movie Joker. You seen that one? That was
Yeah,
I thought it was a great movie, the first one. I heard the second one's terrible, but that's what it
I didn't
reminds me
see the
of.
second
Is
one. No.
it's like, yes, okay, like he got a lot of attention, and you've got a bunch of maniacs online talking about how we need to kill all the CEOs. But it's like, okay, is that really? I mean, think about, okay, in the thing he wrote, he talks about how his mom, I think it was, or someone in his family, has been really sick and in pain, and they refuse to help. How much pain do you think they're in now? Because now their son's going to jail. How about the daughter of the guy that you just shot? She's going to grow up without a dad. It's like
No, right.
it's pushing destruction and chaos and like, just fear out into the world rather than building it up in a positive way. Now it is effective at getting attention. I agree with, but I'd also say some of the, I mean, there's been very successful peaceful protests, which I think we've referenced before, where, a lot of the most progressive events in times have come from peaceful protests. All of the famous people we think about, MLK, Gandhi, these are all peaceful protesters who were more productive than, say, the Unabomber was. The Unabomber was a violent protester, and he warned about how technology is going to take over everything. And here we are 30 years later, no one's done anything about it. Technology is taking over everything, and we just remember the Unabomber as some psychopath.
Yeah, so all right, like I was actually reading about the Indian independence movement before this because I knew like, like nonviolent protests were going to come up. That's a great example. People like to point to MLK as another great example. How many other great examples are there versus every other political change you see throughout history? How many of them have been violent? Basically, all the rest of them have been violent. No, what was it, the Glorious Revolution, is that what it's called for England?
Yeah, the glory.
Uh,
Yeah.
I,
Oh
I
no, I
think
mean,
I think they just kind of like kicked in the door and like made King John sign like their new constitution. Like I
I
think that was
mean,
like another one. But
the United States of America started because of a very violent protest. But
as as
so
did as did most other successful political movements throughout history.
so now I think okay, that's a good point too. So how come those ones worked, but then you look at some, there's been other violent ones who that have totally backfired, or at least
Oh
they've
yeah,
done nothing. Like January
Mo
6th, I would say.
more prob far more. You have
January
to
6th, I think, has done January 6th. It was I consider that a violent protest. That hurt Trump more than anything else, I think, in the entire eight that there he's never going to live that one down. And it's like, okay, so that one totally backfired. It, there's what's the difference? I think the difference is whether or not the violence is actually justified. And so, like something like the American Revolution, the reason the violence started was after the Boston Massacre, and so there's been ongoing, problems back and forth, ongoing protests and debates. But once the Boston Massacre occurred and the redcoats actually shot at civilians and committed a violent act, then it seemed to the public eye that the violence is now justified in return. Boom, that starts the revolution, or something
Yeah,
along those lines, right?
I kind of liked the answer. Like you said, when is violence? I think violence ends up being justified when you win.
I don't know. I would say in a form of a protest. I mean, it is the trolley problem kind of, but I wouldn't say that it's justified. Like, okay, I can protest, um, like some of the stuff that we've seen over the recent years. Like, I can protest, something going on my street. Oh, they opened up, a store and they discriminate against, white people. I can go in there and start fighting people and shooting up the store. I don't think that's justified. Even though if something that they're doing might be wrong, even if I win, I get everyone on my side and they all say, yeah, he was right to do that. I don't know if that makes it right. Does the mob consensus make it justified, or should there be some type of kind of hard line rule where it's like, all right? And I think in the mob consensus, it does tend to violence tends to be justified when it's in response to oppression or violence
Yeah,
against
like so,
someone.
so that's where like the French Revolution stemmed from, right? Like that
Right.
was like, essentially mob violence, like, like incredible disparity levels, and here's the difference, right? People point right now to America versus France right before the revolution, right? And they say that we have actually even more levels of economic disparity than they did, right? Here's the problem is that even still, like, even if there's more disparity in modern America, most people have food on their plates, right? Like mob
Yeah.
mentality kind of becomes justified when it's like, all right, we literally cannot survive, right? That's when the social contract is broken between, the elite and, the proletariat, essentially. Like if we do not have our baseline needs met, then that's when essentially like the tipping point occurs.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, we're too comfortable as it is, which makes me think. I don't think when we talk about the disparity of wealth, um, not to get all down the rabbit hole of it, but I think that does play a role here. Is it's like, okay, yes, there is the same amount of disparity, but the ones at the bottom of modern America are richer than the ones at the top of
Right.
France was back in those days, and because of that, it's
In
like we
in
don't
in
have
so,
the
in some
motivation.
ways, like in some ways, absolutely, right? Like in terms of, actual monetary wealth, no, sure, but like in some ways, in terms of, like cold medicine, right?
Yeah,
That,
like
like
just quality of life,
cold,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah. I'm in an air conditioned room right
right,
now, but
right.
but um, but going off that though is if people are dying like it was in France at the time,
Mhm.
and people are watching their loved ones die, that does seem to be at least a start of a justification for a
Yeah,
a violent a
right.
violent revolution. In this case, I mean,
Now
you
here
can
you
put
go.
the blame on the healthcare guy,
How
but
many people are dying because of a poor healthcare system?
I would disagree a little bit there because it is not that people are dying. It is an incompetent system. It's a corrupt system, but it is the system is not in killing people. the drug companies, the healthcare insurance companies, these companies are not getting paid to kill people. They're getting paid to save people, and people are mad because they're not saving enough people. So there's a big difference between that and when knights are going around and stealing the peasants and serfs' last loaf of bread and not caring and letting them die. What's happening. Is that these people are denying service to someone who say can't afford it or isn't buying it. That's not their. It's not right, and it could be a much better system, but it's not that they're the ones pulling the trigger to the gun, which is why I think this case is not justified. But I do think there are plenty of cases where, in history and I'm sure in the future, where it may be justified.
No, and then, you know, bringing it back to like the specific case is again, even if this guy was the CEO and enacted some terrible policies, it's still not right to take matters into your own hands and take the dude's life, right? What is right is to maybe like fucking march thousands of people up there and like demand that they change their practice, or fucking God forbid, you know, people start choosing different insurance companies instead of that one if it's so horrible, right? You know, like
Yeah, well, similar example, and I was thinking about this, and I would almost say my opinion might shift drastically if rather than this CEO of the health insurance company who may or may not have been a bad guy, works for a bad system, if it was someone who we know, like Purdue Pharma, I can't think of the name of the guy who was running it or the family, but they were knowingly killing people. They were selling oxy and all these different types of drugs, knowing that it was extremely addictive, knowing that people were going to die from it, like thousands of people. I would almost say that if he wouldn't kill that guy, I would say like, all right, still not condone, still not
I was gonna say,
encouraging
so
violence in any way,
how
but
about
that's a little bit
alcohol
better.
distributors then?
I mean, but like again, you're right. It's the same thing. It's you can't have one guy go and take it into his own hands because there is some individual responsibility that comes with it too. You get addicted to alcohol. Yes, that's a horrible thing. Was it Smirnoff that we're going to blame? It's a tough one, but I mean, it's I would say in that case that would be more justified than what just occurred because the CEO of a health insurance company, he's not he's the middleman. Not that I'm a fan of the health insurance companies. I think we
Right.
should get rid of them totally. But I mean, if we're going to take out literally from what we know, an innocent man, innocent until proven guilty, I haven't seen this guy do anything that was, deserving of that. But in other cases, I would, maybe lean a little bit the other way if it was someone that we
I
knew.
mean, it's also important that the rule of law be respected, that, you know, instead of
Definitely, yeah.
vigilanteism, that if it was proven this man is, you know, selling something that's going to harm you and physically bring you ill, you know, like the people producing OxyContin, hopefully, you know, we would disband the business instead of, you know, like killing the guy in the street, right?
Yes, exactly. And yeah, I mean, obviously, rule of law. I see. It seemed. I mean, they got him. They just cuffed and slammed him. I just saw the video. So the rule of law is still intact. But I'm talking more just along the lines of the internet mob all rushing to the side of this vigilante, where it's like, all right. I mean, if he went and shot Diddy or something, then maybe I'd be like, yeah, all right, But like this just it doesn't seem like the right way to do it. But going back to when violence is justified and when it's not, another one, very controversial take. But if we're thinking about it philosophically, would you say Osama bin Laden, 9/11, if, based on our definition of when violence is justified, which is when violence or oppression are being forced onto you. From that perspective, you would almost say, just like I said, this guy seems like a terrorist. I think Osama bin Laden is another guy who, from his perspective, is probably more justified. America is stepping into, their territory. They don't want us there. We've been oppressing their citizens for years and years, and then he responds with a violent act and tragic act, and it's like, obviously, I don't think it's justified, but I can see from their perspective why that might be a case where, like, from their perspective, justified violence. So
Yeah.
it's a real slippery slope, is my point.
And didn't we like arm Osama bin Laden or something? Like, didn't we support him like decades before? And
Yeah,
then,
because it was the Cold War and it was us and the Soviet Union were fighting
uh,
over these Middle Eastern territories. and Osama bin Laden was one of they were on our side. They were fighting off. They didn't want the Soviets in there, so we gave them some weapons to get the Soviets out. As soon as the Soviets left, we took over, and then then he was like, "Well, what the hell?" Yeah, so
I
then he
mean
gave that
the
up.
one of the best headlines, and it's not an Onion headline. It was something like CIA backed group in Syria fights like FBI backed group in Syria. We're like arming multiple groups and they're like fighting each other. So well, that's this is off topic now, but
Yeah, no, I mean, but yes, but that, I guess, the point being is that, from that perspective, it's like, all right, was 9/11 justified? Now, I'm not going to go on camera and say, yes, 9/11 was justified, but I will say that
someone clip it. Someone clip it.
yeah, right. But by this logic that we're speaking of now, from their perspective, that would be justified because it's violence in return for violence, the same way as the American Revolution, same way as the French Revolution. So it's like it is a slippery slope as to like, can we actually define it? I think, the reason it wasn't justified is because they didn't attack, our military. They attacked our civilians, and our civilians didn't do anything. So it's like,
Mhm.
in that sense, that's the only reason it's not justified, I would say, because it's attacking
Right.
innocent people who didn't
Right. So
ask for it.
the philosophical question being, when is violence justified? Uh, so you're saying whenever violence is perpetuated on you, essentially, then
Yes, or like a threat of violence, maybe, or something like
then
that. Yeah.
then the issue becomes, well, what we still have to define what is violence then.
What is violence? Yeah. Okay, that's true. I mean, I know there's been the
And
word
this is hard.
violence.
I'm not expecting you to have like the
Well,
answer, obviously. We're
no, I
talking,
mean,
we're trying to figure this out together.
I think my answer would be violence is like a physical act that causes physical harm. But I know that that I'm laughing because the definition of violence has shifted drastically over the last 10 years. Where now we've heard words are violence from a lot of the protesters. We've heard silence is violence as a
Yeah.
slogan that was coming out. So it's like, yes,
Hmm.
but I do think that is intentional because if silence is violence and violence justifies violence, you know what I'm saying? If words are violence and silence is violence and violence is justified, if it's been implemented onto you, then that basically justifies violence in any protest because they can find anything, define it as violence, and then say, "Oh, you deserve violence in return."
Yeah, yeah, but I think wouldn't the silence is violence be something, like if you if you support like our movement, right, and stay silent, then you are perpetuating the wrong type of violence then.
Well, yeah. So I think the first time I heard that was during the like the George Floyd kind of Black Lives Matter protest going on, which is when the whole black squares, when everyone was posting the black squares, I would see people
I never
posting
posted
silence is
one.
violence. Neither
Right.
did I, but according to the protest leaders, by
This
not posting one, we were being violent. So
this is
that,
the
I think that was the point of the
zeitgeist of the
slogan.
time.
Right. But I think, by not posting it, their opinion was that we were being violent. And so I think that was, kind of used to justify violence a little bit. But that is a very good point, is defining what violence is. Like it's fundamental to the entire debate
Right,
where
right, right. So
it tends to
is
get
like
skewed.
is the healthcare system perpetuating violence on, susceptible people?
See, and yeah, I would say maybe yes, I could see it, but I wouldn't say that there's a single person. I think that's
Right,
fair.
right. And that's the issue, right? Where this type of protest, where we agree that this was not a justified form of violence, right? That picking out this singular individual for a systemic problem is not correct. That is not
Mhm.
justified.
Yes, yeah. But I would also say that another thing about this one too, same thing when it comes to, defining when violence is acceptable. There is no force at all either. Whereas like if you know if you're in a country, back in the day, and you're forced to either go through some type of oppressive tedious labor while you're being beaten, otherwise you're thrown in the gulags, or like if slavery is a thing and you're forced to do it versus like that, like that I think violence is then justified. In this
Anyone like
case
held
there's
in
no force.
bondage, anyone held in bondage, like
Right.
slavery, right?
Yeah,
That is
right.
that is completely
Forced
justified,
labor where
right?
it's against your will, but there is no I mean, there's no force involved in the healthcare system. There's no you don't have to have insurance. You don't have to, you don't have it's like you don't have to go to a certain doctor. You don't have to have a certain insurance. There's problems with it because you don't have as much choice as we would, of course, like us to have. But at the same time, it's like, you can't really say that the health insurance system is oppressing you because it's like, well, you have alternatives. The health insurance is the best option out of the alternatives we have. Still a terrible option, but it's like I wouldn't say it's oppressive.
Right. Like, all right, maybe it's not a perfect option. It's better than any other options you have. The other options you have essentially being treating yourself, paying for this out of pocket, right? It's not amazing. But again, is it going out and perpetuating violence on people? Right, like probably not, right?
No,
But
yeah,
but can
yep,
we change it? Absolutely, right? Now, so
yeah.
how should we change it, right? Here's a little shift we can go into. A lot of the most successful countries in like healthcare systems have universal healthcare, like a government, single buyer system is what it's called. Uh, I know that there's a lot of other types of systems you can have. I think you would argue for a system, completely devoid of the insurance companies, essentially, and allowing, like the free market to take over.
Well, yeah. See, I mean, it's tough, but I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would for sure say devoid of insurance. I do think it would be better if insurance wasn't through employment as like the
Yeah.
default. It's like I don't see why it can't just be like car insurance where you could just buy it. You could just get it yourself and
So
pick
that's a
between.
really, really interesting rabbit hole to go down is why is health insurance linked to employment?
So I actually read this one, and the reason why is because there was I can tell you this. I think ChatGPT told me the reason why was because back during the Great Depression, the problem was that they weren't able to get enough people to spend money, and so the government actually put wage ceilings on employments because they didn't the money was deflating the value of the money was deflating. So in order to stop that, the government decided to put wage ceiling. So rather than minimum wage, they're giving people maximum wage. And
Right.
so in order to compete for labor, we can't give you any more money. But what we will do is we'll give you health insurance as an additional benefit rather than an increased wage because they
Mhm.
couldn't increase the wages. And that was in like 1930 something. And the depression's been over, and they have not changed it.
Yeah, right. There's things you'll see online, that employment is linked to health insurance because, the system needs you to be working, right? That's, one of the things people online love to spew about. It's like, oh, the capitalist system needs its grunt labor force, essentially. They keep you like shackled to like the system, essentially,
I
forcing
do think
healthcare to be
that's
through
partially true.
employment.
That does seem to make a lot of sense, honestly, too. I do think that is partially true. That they tie it to you because it's like, yeah, you can't, you can't risk not having a job, especially if you have kids in a family. You can't risk like, dropping out and starting your own business because then you have to go months or years without health insurance, and it's just too much of a
You,
risk.
you
So you
can
got to
purchase
stay.
health insurance without having a job, right?
I think you can. Yeah, I think you can.
Is it
I don't
just
know
like
why it's
way
not
is
more
it just way
popular.
more expensive or something? Like is it
Yeah, maybe it must
I think that's
be.
a whole thing. It's like reasonably cheap when you do it through your company, which is why everyone does it through their company. But I think it's like way more expensive if you don't do it through your company. Which that is actually kind of crazy that that's the how it's set up.
Well, it kind of makes sense because the way insurance goes is it's like you're pooling risk. So, if you go through the company, you're basically, if it all goes through the company, then it's less risk for the insurance company because, not everyone at your company is going to get a terminal illness this year and take all the
Yeah,
money.
yeah, but
It's like
like
you're going to have it throughout
can't I
the.
get insurance through, some company who has a ton of other people? Like maybe they have 30 businesses that they, do have their like contracts with, like can't risk be pooled among, other people? Can it be pooled along with people who do have employment?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it seems like it would definitely be better. But I think it's like, it's just because So it's like, yeah, you're just one guy, so I can get health insurance for one guy, but my company can get health insurance for 200 people, and so it's that
So
pool
they
of
can
risk
buy
within
a
the one
better
contract.
bulk rate.
The company can give the
Yes.
employees a better
Right, right,
deal
right,
because
right.
they get a better deal because they have a bulk rate. Yes, exactly.
Right.
That's what I think it is, at least. And so, but yeah, that's one thing. It is kind of funny though that this whole United Healthcare thing and all the healthcare debate, it really drove a wedge because it's all been right left, especially election season. It's been right versus left, and the right and the left both hate the healthcare system. And
Hmm.
normally we talk about how the right's on or the left is on this side, the right's on this side, and usually the answer is somewhere in the middle. And I think this is one where it's like that's wrong because
Yeah,
the right
right.
is all about private healthcare. Healthcare should be private. The left is all about no, we want universal healthcare. So it's what we have is like right in the middle, and it's way worse than anything else. I think.
Yeah, no. I was, and then going into that a little bit as well. Most of the time that uh, the left and right are pretty like opposite on whether something needs to change or not. People are pretty goddamn unified right now that something does need to change in our system, right? Now that's one of the things. Typically, one side's usually voting like for something to happen, one side's usually voting against something happening. Right now, both sides want something to happen, which is a pretty cool thing to see.
Yeah, yeah, it is nice to see. I mean, no one, they might not want the same thing to happen, but no one wants it.
Right.
No one wants what we
No one
currently
wants what's
have.
currently
We've got the
happening.
absolute. We've
Yeah.
pissed off both sides with what we have now.
I
So
mean, it's
that's
it's
good.
crazy though when you look at we have the most expensive healthcare system in the world and like the 40th best coverage, right? So clearly, clearly there has to be a solution that doesn't involve spending a shit ton of money on it, right? Like other systems are cheaper than the one we're doing. We have a purposefully inflated system, I believe, because there's money to be made for people in that, in portion of the bubble, essentially.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's. I mean, that's it. It is the insurance companies that are the reason that everything is so expensive. It's because it's like if there was no insurance at all, it wouldn't cost that much to get the operation or to get the medicine. The reason it costs so much is because there's because we're not paying for it. Like we don't have a choice.
Right,
The health
right.
insurance doesn't care. The health insurance company doesn't care what the cost is because they have fixed margins. So they're going to make if it costs more to them, then they're just going to make more. So they don't care. They're telling the pharma companies bump up the price. We don't have a choice, and so there's no real consumer. There's no real customer that forces the pharma companies and the healthcare companies to compete and bring the prices down. So instead, it's just inflating up, and we're
So,
paying the
so
average man is paying the
I,
price.
I saw an example. LASIK eye surgery used to be covered by insurance, right? A few years back, it stopped being covered by insurance because they said it was a cosmetic procedure and not like a medical procedure, right? Lo and behold, as soon as insurance companies stopped footing the bill, then uh, individual practices had to start setting price points to be competitive against other companies, right? And the cost of LASIK went from something like I'm probably gonna get this wrong, but something like 20 or $30,000 essentially. Not that you had to pay 20 or $30,000, right? The insurance company's paying 20 or $30,000. You paid a portion of it, but now the price was like three or $4,000.
Hmm. Yeah, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, imagine a system where, say we still have insurance for big operations, brain surgery or chemo or something, but we don't need to do it for the entire like how much would it really cost in a competitive market to go get a checkup at the doctor or get a
Right. Yeah,
cast? It's like, do we really need
like
insurance
20,
for that?
30 bucks. Right.
Yeah, right. It's like if it weren't for or to get like a prescription or something where the pharma companies are jacking up the prices, and it's like, okay, if there was actually competitive pricing and it wasn't this insurance system, then it would, I'm guarantee you there'd be a flood of other companies rushing in to try to make insulin cheaper, to make whatever prescription cheaper. It makes sense. It seems like the insurance is really just not helping anyone. I'll say that.
Right. And then even, countries like, like Nordic models, right? Like Sweden, Finland that always rank highest in fucking everything. Even that system is cheaper than the one that we have, right? People always be like bitch about, oh my God, universal healthcare would be like so expensive, right? Even that system, I'm pretty sure would cost less than the one we're currently fucking doing. So, just try something essentially.
Starting to sound like we're starting to sound like Luigi Mangione here. I
And
think
and then
that
and
I
and
think
and
go ahead, go
then
ahead.
here's where the problem becomes is this video is going to get 30 views and 100 million people are talking about that guy. So,
True, but half of those 100 million are saying we don't like that guy and we are pro health insurance now. So maybe not half, but some of them. I heard
I,
today. I heard a good one today. It was like some old guy was saying how it's actually because it's this is all just a distraction because Pelosi's going to prison, and the deep state. It was some big QAnon thing that was going on. So it's nice to know that that type of stuff still floating around. Haven't heard that one in a couple of years.
dude, no, that's the best is that anytime anything happens, it's always a cover up for something.
Yeah, it's a cover up.
It's
Yeah,
like,
it's another
oh,
cover up.
like Diddy got the Diddy files got released. It's like, oh, well, at the same time, like this happened. Like they don't want you
Yeah,
from seeing this. It's like, oh, it's all perfectly choreographed, apparently.
yeah, so it's nice to know there's still at least some of those people out there. I remember back, 2020 COVID era, it was like nonstop chaos. People were saying all this crazy shit. That was when Epstein was coming out too, and so now that Diddy's out, it's round two, I guess. But um, running out of time here. We'll
Yeah.
cut to the break. Be right back.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. So let's kick off this half of the conversation. We're talking about, ways of protests. When is violence justified? So we're going to talk a little bit about nonviolent protests. Do you have any examples of what you think a nonviolent protest that could be actually effective would look like? Because we've talked about how ineffective most nonviolent protest is. Can you think of any that would be more effective than, just standing in the streets, essentially?
Yeah, I think I like boycotts. I think
Yeah.
boycotts are probably the way to go, especially if it's if it's a some type of corporate entity that you're boycotting. Um, I mean, I even that can go even as an individual who is like, okay, maybe if I choose to go to this store instead of this store, I mean, I don't think Walmart's going to notice, but it is like something, and it's like the more people that join in, then the more they notice.
Yeah, yeah. So for something like that to work, it would have to be like a group societal effort, I think, though. Because, like Walmart does not care if they lose me, if they lose you, if they lose 1,000 of us, right? They start to care once they start losing thousands of us, essentially, right? So it literally at that point has to be like a social media effort, I believe. Would social
Yeah,
media like allow that to happen?
yeah, I think so. I think it's happened. I think like the Bud Light one was one example
Yeah,
recently.
that's true.
Um, I mean, I think there's been a few. I think social media should allow it to happen for sure. Being as new as it is, I know there's a lot of confusion and back and forth for a while on what their role is, and I think they're starting to hone in a little bit on their role seems to be now just hands off, at least more than it used to be. But yeah, and I think that is the thing is because being in this digital age that we are in, some of the old ways of nonviolent protests that might have worked probably would not work any longer, but we do have new ways, and I think that's probably one of the major ones that assembling a large group of people to all join in on something like that um, is easier than ever.
So against a corporation, that could work, right? If like enough people teamed up and decided, we won't buy this product anymore, then that would absolutely work, at least in theory. Can you do that with healthcare? though, for
No, yeah,
example.
right. Healthcare is no, you can't. I don't think you could do that. But I know that's a good
So what
question.
does a nonviolent protest of healthcare look like? That literally might only look like a million man march on Washington, essentially. Like what?
Yeah,
How else would it look? Like I guess a nationwide voting sweep of, like we need to elect candidates that are going to vote for this type of change to our healthcare system.
yeah. No, I mean, yeah, that's
How much choice do we actually have in who we elect, though?
well, I think that was kind of at least part of the RFK movement was trying to push back on healthcare, and I think it worked a little bit. Maybe not yet, but I think it at least got people aware, got people thinking about it. I do give props to the guys who go out. So I saw on the shooter here that we were talking about. Can't remember what the words were. He had written on the bullet, deny, depose,
Uh,
something like that.
deny, delay, something else. Yeah.
It was based on a book, right, that exposed the
Yeah.
healthcare system. Now, not a fan of the shooter. Don't think what he did is a good form of protest. I think it's a great form of protest. Shout out to whoever wrote the book. That's it's putting out books and documentaries. Me and Meg watched this documentary about the Purdue Pharma. That's why I brought them up earlier. Can't think of what it's called now. Painkillers or something like that. And it was exposing all the bullshit that they pulled. I think exposure, getting people to notice, and spreading awareness easier than ever. That's a start. But at the end of the day, I don't know. Even if people are aware of it, can they really do much about it? That's where the problem starts kicking, I guess. But
Yeah. And that's not even this discussion, right? That's a different discussion uh, in it of itself. Um, large a large group of people, marching on Washington, would that kick the pants of senators, of Congress, and say, oh, well, I guess we actually have to, right? Be What's really interesting even about that type of nonviolent protest is there not a form of implied threat with that?
yeah, I mean,
Like
kind of, yeah. Seems like it.
like we are nonviolent for now, right? But there's a whole lot of us and only so many of you.
Yeah, I mean, it also is just could be just for attention. It's like we're getting the attention, but at the same time, it's like who are you getting the attention of? That could be a part of the problem with the healthcare system is that yes, everyone knows it's bad, like we talked about, but does anyone have a solution? Or can any large group agree on a solution? Now, you've got the right and left. They both think it's bad, but they both want entirely opposite solutions. I'm sure there's other groups that have other proposed solutions that are just too complex and technical for the average person to even understand. And so it's like that's part of it too, is just the complexity of it and the average person's just kind of lack of understanding. Whereas we both can say, yeah, the healthcare system is all screwed up. We need to fix it somehow. It's like, all right, well, even if the politicians were working for us, they'd say, what do you want? It's like, okay, what do we want?
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. Cheap healthcare, please, right?
yeah, right. But and that like that's one where it's like, oh yeah, everyone wants it cheaper and better, and it's like, all right, so how do we get there? It's like,
Mhm.
well, let's just make it free. Well, okay, how are we going to fund it? And it's just like you can go down that circle of what needs to be done about it, and it's just that's where all kind of falls apart because everyone wants free, universal, and affordable, or yeah, free and universal healthcare, and it's like, all right, well then, how do we get that? And then no one really knows, or at least no one really agrees.
Yeah, right. And at a certain point, you want to say, like, all right, can't we just like copy the best healthcare systems that we see, right? Like, what are the best systems? Can that be replicated here? And I don't know what the answer to that is. Like, if it's possible to, replicate, like much smaller countries that have, much like higher, like effective levels of healthcare than we do, would those systems even work here, right? That's I don't know. I, I think really we just have to start like trying different models essentially though. Like, can we try like both? Is that possible? Have
Yeah, I
like
mean, we need to try something. I
right,
think that's so the like the Nordic country models, they do seem to work. And like you said, I hear a lot, some, a counter to when people propose, well, why don't we use those models? A counter I hear a lot is, well, those are small countries and they're homogenous, and it's, we were looking at the system earlier, and one of the main features of the Nordic system is that people collaboratively work together and trust the government.
right.
That's not going to
Trust in
probably
government is
so
very
yeah,
high, and
yeah,
so
that's vital to the system. We don't have that, so that one. So there's probably a little bit of friction that would come along with it, but it is worth looking at and examining and seeing if that's something that we can at least maybe take bits and pieces of and try to work in. But I mean, yeah, I think I'm a free market capitalist guy. I think healthcare is a tough one. I think if we go more towards the free market, get some of the insurance companies or even just some of the regulations on the insurance companies out of there, it might bring prices down, like we talked about. Then there's also the left side of it, which is let's get the private companies out of there. Let's make it all government. That also would probably bring companies down. It seems like we're in the worst case scenario. I'd probably take either of those two over what we have now.
right, right. So you want to move on possibly? This is kind of similar. So what we're talking about, like when is violence justified? There was the incident in New York. Do you know the names of those guys? Penny
Uh,
was
yeah,
the
Penny, Brian Penny or Daniel
yeah.
Penny or something.
Name's not really important. Essentially, what happened was, homeless guy went onto a train, started making, some threats towards people and acting kind of crazy, as you know, mentally unwell people do. Maybe he was on drugs, right? And a guy stepped up and put him in a chokehold and eventually ended up killing him, right? Uh, Another example of violence, and he was what didn't he actually just get released? Wasn't he
Yeah,
found not guilty, right?
he was acquitted,
Acquitted.
and I believe it was because it was ruled as it was in the defense of someone. Someone else was being attacked, and
Right.
he was being the good Samaritan. Basically, is what the jury came up with. Which and it was on video. I remember seeing the video a while ago. Obviously, it's like
I
quick
I was
video, so it's
I
hard to
was
tell exactly the
looking for a
context. But
video and I didn't really see one, but that's one of those things
there's
where,
one out there. I remember it. It's been a while. It's been over a
yeah.
year since that story first hit.
But so in this case, the question being, was that violence justified? For me, it all comes down to like context, right? You can't go around killing all the crackheads that you see on the side of the street, right? Even if they pose a clear and evident danger, you can't go around doing that, right? That's just not something you can do.
See
If
there,
if
that's probably where I would say yes, agree with the first part. Obviously, you can't. But if I think if someone does pose a clear and present danger, I think
uh,
then that would maybe justify it in at
yeah,
least
but
a lot of the cases.
clear and present danger is very subjective, I would say. No, in that crowded car where, maybe he like grabbed someone, started shaking someone, maybe it was absolutely justified, right? There's definitely been times where you're walking down the street and there's, been, someone, if you've ever been in any big city, right? You see some like homeless person probably on drugs, muttering, kind of like rocking back and forth, and
Right? Yeah.
you feel nervous, right? Like when does self-defense come into play, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And exactly two separate scenarios. That the subjectivity of whether this is a real threat or not is key. And so it's like,
Yes.
and if it is, then yes, justified. If not, no. But there's a gray area where it's like, I don't know, is it? But I mean,
And so in this case of the guy on the train, right? There were a ton of other people there, right? So those people, I'm sure, got called in to testify, I would hope, right? And whatever those people said, would assume then influenced the jury's decision, right? So I believe I remember seeing at least one other person there was like thanking the guy for like doing it, right? That person was probably called and said, "Yes, like I can, say that I felt threatened, that he was a clear and evident threat, essentially." And that's probably why he got acquitted, was because, like other people were there and helped assess the situation. Then the issue becomes what happens when it's like a one-on-one interaction.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, because I'm sure that, I mean, that is a very solid grounds for determining whether there was a threat or not. I mean, that's basically what our entire justice system is like we don't want to give one person the power, so we're going to pick these random people and they're going to look at it and whatever they think, these 12 random people, whatever they think, we're going to go with that. When you've got, a subway car full of witnesses, you know, you kind of have a jury in a sense that was there to watch the event take place. So I'm sure, yes, I'm sure that probably weighed heavily on it. But yes, if no one's watching, then it's all just he said, she said, and
So now,
there's
so now
it's tough to make a ruling there. But
here's a parallel I'll bring up. You had brought this up actually during the break. Kyle Rittenhouse, right? So here's one difference that I see in the those two situations, right? Say you're for a given that there was a clear and evident danger to both parties, right? To Kyle
okay,
Rittenhouse and to that guy and the group. In my opinion, there is a difference with the guy on the train because he's just a guy on a train, right? He is not aware of what is going on. He had no, knowledge that he was going to be thrust into a potentially dangerous situation, right? Kyle Rittenhouse, I think, was a little different because he chose to bring a gun to a live riot, right?
yes,
And when
different,
you,
but I don't know. If, I would say agreed. Whereas, yes, this Daniel Penny was his name. I think much based on underlying assumptions, both of them were acting in some
yes,
form of self defense.
yes,
This guy's much
that's a
more
given in
innocent.
both.
I think that
Right.
not neither of them are guilty, but this guy does seem to be more innocent. And actually, I would almost say somewhat courageous. I think it's a good thing. Assuming that this was a threat,
Yes, if
someone is
given,
to
if
step up and
given,
help.
yes,
I
yes.
think that's actually probably something that I would think is a good thing overall. But the Rittenhouse situation, yes, different. But in the eyes of the law, though, I would still say assume based on what we know or at least what we want to assume from what I remember, it's been a while too, but from what I remember that case, there was people like beating him up, like like there was people chasing him down the street, attacking him. It did seem to be in self defense. At the same time, like you said, he walked into an active riot with a gun and was clearly not on the side of the rioters, kind of instigating a little bit. I will
I,
I will give
that's
that.
that's kind of what I would say. Like he, I think, was almost the instigator in that sense, even if he wasn't, pointing the gun, say, at them. Bringing a gun to a riot is a form of instigation, whereas that guy riding a train is not a form of instigation, right?
Yeah, definitely a difference there. But I mean, would you
And
say
I think it sets a perfectly fine precedent of that dude on the train. If you act in self-defense, you can stand up for yourself. Perfectly fine. I think it might set a bad precedent if you allow people to bring guns into riots and then say anyone who may threaten you during that, you're allowed to kill.
Well, okay, but yes, I do agree, but I would also say, I mean, it is kind of ironic. We are talking about a violent riot,
Yeah, yeah,
it, it
no, like but you're
in
placing yourself into that violence.
what about if so say in I don't think he lived there. I think his grandparents lived there, and he was going there to in his I think his claim was he was defending his grandparents' property or something like that. But like say I live in Chicago, say there was a violent riot breaking out right outside my in the street outside my apartment here. Do you think it would be right for me to stand on my porch with a gun as a way of kind of saying like don't don't come mess with my house?
Mm.
I think that would be fair
You
in that
definitely
case.
have the right to sit inside your house and wait for people to barge in your door and then shoot them.
What about
I
stand? What if say I don't own, but say I own the house and
yeah,
I'm standing on my property, like, but looking them dead in the eye, holding an AK.
yeah, and then they come at you.
I feel like, yeah, I
As
mean, it's
yeah,
one thing if you're, if you're like one
and
podcast or
this is where subtlety comes into it, right? You know, like where is the line drawn between like, oh, I'm going out and protecting the town. And that's vigilanteism.
it is
That's
vigilanteism.
that's Kyle Rittenhouse driving over there with a gun saying, I'm protecting others. I am the law.
But it was during a time when the police were not doing anything. The police were literally being told to stand down. I'm not like a big Kyle Rittenhouse fan. I do think that the not guilty verdict was correct. I do also think that he was kind of just getting in, he was asking for it a little bit. But it does bring up a good point though, because in that situation, is it vigilantism? I mean, the claim that he was protecting a property is what he said. I don't know if that's true or not, but say, even if he wasn't on the property, but he was there because his family had a property and he was kind of walking around. He had the gun and and he basically was engaging in vigilantism in his family's neighborhood where there was a violent riot occurring. They were burning down a Wendy's, and the police were told, "Do not get involved." I feel like now I don't think it's right, but I think that whole situation was a bad situation because that is the job of the police, and the fact that all police were racist at that time was kind of a problem because now the police are told not to do their job. It was a very bad situation from the beginning, but
I
in
don't
that situation, I
I
don't
don't know.
know.
I don't know. Like so drawing more parallels, different types of vigilanteism, like if your aunt or whatever needs life-saving care and the only way for her to get this life-saving care, her care has been denied, is it right to go and strong arm some executive to give the okay for your grandma to get this life-saving procedure?
No, I would say no. I mean, yeah, I mean, technically, philosophically, no. I would say it would be, you know, not using violence. That's what I'm trying to say. Not using violence. I don't think.
But then how is that different from driving over to your grandma's house where there's a riot going on and the police aren't doing anything?
Well, I mean, I guess how is it similar? I don't see I'm missing the parallel. I think.
Well, in both cases, you need to use violence to save your loved one.
Yeah, but in one case, you're using violence against someone who is being violent towards your loved one, and in another case, you're using violence against someone who isn't doing anything wrong to you.
It's the yeah, but like it's like the whatever I say it's the executive that is the literal guy like pushing no on this like life-saving procedure that like your healthcare like should cover, and it's just like they're like not covering it.
I think it's
Like that
okay. I think it's because the difference would be because you don't have. I don't think you have the right to use violence to compel someone to do something. You have the right to use violence to stop someone from doing something from you. So in your case with the healthcare situation, you would be using violence to compel someone to do something. Like your case is more similar to me telling you, like, yeah, I want you to give me all your money. I'm going to put a gun to your head, and if you don't do it, then I'm going to shoot you. Well, technically, I was going to use that money to go buy food for my family, so I had the right to do that because I was protecting my family. No, because you're compelling someone to do something for you versus you're defending your there's a difference between then defending your family from someone who's trying to harm them or you. Like the CEO
yeah.
of the healthcare company is not actively trying to harm your grandmother. He's just following a company policy that says, well, no, you're not covered by my, it's a much different scenario, I'd say.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, you see like where, like that's where the gray area comes in essentially. Like I don't know, but like in terms of one riot versus like millions of people not being covered. I don't know. That's,
No, I mean, the goal, the end goal, I agree is more morally or than more ethical in the healthcare scenario than in the Kyle Rittenhouse scenario, I'd say. But I just don't think the ends justify the means when if we look at rather than the goal, we look at the actual system in place. Whereas, you know, in this Penny case or the Rittenhouse case, that should be legal versus the other situation shouldn't be legal. I think that's the reason that would be like my main argument as to why is it's the act of compulsion rather than defense.
yeah, could be.
But and so and in any case, what if we were to look at the alternative in this Daniel Penny situation where um okay, maybe from his perspective it seemed to be a threat. Maybe from a handful of people in the subway car it seemed to be a threat. But there were also just as many people in there who said like, the guy was a crackhead, he was goofing around, but he wasn't going to hurt anybody. Now we're in a real sticky situation because do you want I mean what's better for the future, what's better for the society? Do you want people like this Daniel Penny guy stepping up and you know maybe from his perspective defending an innocent civilian versus because I think what happens if and I think it happened with his arrest and there was a lot of media against him. I think what happened is that it incentivized able-bodied 20 something men to kind of sit back and watch when something might be going down rather than step up and help because it's like, oh, well, I don't want to get involved because then I'm the bad guy. You think that weighs into it at all? I think
Yeah,
that might be
no,
something.
no. So that first part you're talking about, all right, if everyone basically agreed, like, yeah, this guy was crazy, he was going to hurt someone, then all right, it's a pretty open and shut case, right? Like that's like good job. You stopped a guy from harming other people, right? Basically everyone will agree in that case. When it then becomes like I couldn't tell what his actions were going to be, right? Like did he pose a threat? I don't know. Like was he right to choke the guy out? Like I don't know. Your then follow-up question that was, is it better for people to do it or better for people to not to do it? The problem
Well,
is
I
they're all
guess is it a good idea to make a villain out of someone for doing something, even if he might have been, in the best intentions, but it was real bang bang play, it could have gone either way. He stepped up and did something. Is it right to is it a good idea for society to demonize him for that when that could then disincentivize someone from stepping up in the similar situation where someone actually does need help from someone who is a threat.
yeah. So there's a very interesting psychology experiment that kind of plays into this. I don't remember the exact name of it, but I think it's based off a real case in New York City in like the 60s where a woman was getting murdered on the street, yelling out like help, 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 help in front of a very large apartment building. And there are so many people in the apartment building that like everyone basically, oh, it's the bystander effect. That's what this is, right?
Yeah, yeah, bystander
there's
effect. Yeah,
there's so many people that no one actually steps up to the plate because everyone just else assumes someone else is going to do something, right? I think like no one ended up calling the police, right? It's so so are you saying that this would be a better thing to allow than to not allow? Like is that what you're saying? Or
I mean, I really don't have a hard point on it. It's
yeah,
just it's kind
the,
of a
the
good
problem is it
just
all just again comes down to subjectivity because I'm all for it when you save someone's life and when it turns out this guy was kind of just a crackhead and you choked him out and killed him, it's like, what are you doing, guy? Like,
yeah, yeah, right, yeah. No, I mean, I definitely think it's you know, I guess if I did have I guess my point would be being that this guy was found not guilty. And and obviously juries don't get it right every time. But let's assume let's assume he wasn't guilty. should there be some type of accountability? And I'm not saying to everyone because everyone talks on social media and everyone just makes up nonsense. But I do think there should be some type of accountability, and I think so for Rittenhouse too, actually, for the mainstream media and these mainstream public figures who are demonizing this guy as a racist or as a. It's like that's one thing. It's like, oh yeah, they're saying like he's like a racist who just goes around murdering black
Killing
people,
black
and
guys,
it's
right?
yeah, and it's like there is whether it's small, big, I don't know, but there is definitely at least some societal repercussions to the demonization of this guy. Whereas now, how many other people have would have normally stepped up, but because they saw this case, they saw what happened to this guy, they say, "Ah, yeah, not going to be me," and then the bystander effect multiply. So I feel like there's got to like not even by rule of law, but just as a
You
cultural norm. Like there's got to be like we
yeah.
got to stop doing that. That's
You
that's probably
can't
my
make a
point.
law about that because that's ridiculous, right?
Yeah,
You
right.
can't
You
make a law
can't.
like you must be a hero, right? That's why
No,
someone is a
no, yeah,
hero because it's an exceptional feat. It's something that the normal person doesn't do. The normal person stands back and says, your survival, it's not a bad thing. Your survival instinct kicks in and says, we're staying out of this situation, right? It's not inherently immoral for you to not throw yourself into the line of fire in these instances. You can't like mandate it, but like that social ethos of, do something and instead of don't do something. Like you said, that I could see that obviously being a beneficial thing for society to have.
yeah. And just to and same goes with this Luigi guy who killed the CEO. Whereas it's like I was a little bit like I didn't like this story at all, and it wasn't because of the killer really. It's like all right, obviously there's a bunch of people out there who are going to kill people. That's a normal thing. I thought the most despicable part of this was how the entire internet got behind him. Is like yeah, this is a good thing that he killed this guy. The same way this Daniel Penny guy, the entire internet got behind and said, oh, this guy's terrible. And I feel like that is a major problem because that social fabric where yes, we can't make laws about this type of thing, but it should be, a cultural norm, social norm that is something heroic, and one of those is something heroic, the other one is something evil. And when the internet and the mob is trying to like reshape what the cultural norm is, where the guy who murders a man in the street for for no reason other than he was mad at the system, that guy's the hero. The guy who stepped up and defended a woman who was being attacked on a train, that guy's the villain. It's just it's destroying everything we have as a society when it comes to those type of cultural norms. You know?
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the questions you asked in there, like, is the media right to deplore this man as a racist? No, obviously not, right? No, that's mean you don't like the big media, they do that even if they inherently don't believe that this man was a racist. They're just going to run that headline because that's what sells, right? They know that that's what's going to fuel the flames of, clicks. That's what's going to keep people's attentions for more than 2 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Because Richie, here you go. If you're a big media headline, a big media outlet, what's your headline? Hero saves people on subway. All right, cool. Like
Boring.
how many subway heroes are there?
Yeah.
Man chokes out black guy. And
Yeah.
I'm not picking a side here with saying that. I'm just saying in this, like hypothetical
No, that's right.
situation,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like what
Racist chokes out black guy is going to get a lot more clicks than hero saves old lady for sure.
right. That's part of it. Is that a good thing? Obviously not.
Just the
Where
negative. It's the negative bias in the media. Just
yes.
altogether is like it's just on full display. But speaking of what you said earlier about making a law um, that forces people to be heroes, I
Hmm.
have heard there was a town that has the Good Samaritan law where
Okay.
you have to do something. If you see someone in trouble, you have to help them or you go to jail. I think there was a full sitcom finale on that one.
uh,
Think
is that a real thing?
no, no, I don't know.
No,
That's
no,
a
that's
Seinfeld finale,
yeah,
but
yeah,
we
yeah.
could, if we
That,
wanted to,
the,
we could make that law, and then we can you know, just have a society that basically operates like the finale of Seinfeld.
the Good Samaritan clause. I kind of like that finale. I don't know. My dad says it was weak. I don't know, but
If there is any poor soul still watching this, we're some big Seinfeld guys.
yeah. All right. Any closing thoughts?
No, yeah, I mean, kind of a sporadic episode here. Big news this week, so we want to make sure we covered it. But we're starting the new season, trying to get a little bit away from politics. Still might talk a little politics, but we want to focus on more important stuff. We're going to talk a lot about education, maybe a little bit of technology, innovation, looking towards the future. So stay tuned. We took a little break, a month off or so, but we're going to be back to weekly episodes shortly to kick off the new year 2025 and hopefully get into some interesting stuff that we haven't talked about before.
Yeah, no, education is definitely up there next on the docket. Uh, I think we may interject with, current events as we see fit. I'm sure when Trump gets into office, something's going to happen and we're not going to be able to, shy away from it. But, we're going to try and take some deep dives into, different aspects of society. Try and look a little deeper, see if there's things we can change, see just what's interesting, what we want to talk about. So yeah, uh,
Hey, last point. Speaking
yeah,
of Trump, I wanted to mention this because I heard it on a podcast yesterday, and it's kind of crazy. The next presidential election, 2028, there will be a significant portion of the voting bloc who is too young to remember a time when Donald Trump was not the Republican nominee.
yeah,
It would be the last time he wasn't was 2012. In 2028, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds they would have been 2, 3, and 5, or 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so they would have no, like, there will be a large portion of the voters who have never seen a Republican nominee other than Donald Trump.
that's crazy. Have you seen that for the last like 4 or 5 presidents or something? They've all been from the same like age generation. So for the last like 20 or 30 years, we've been controlled by like a single voting
Single
age group,
generate.
a
Yeah, it
single
makes sense actually.
generation.
So like, yeah, so basically, like Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden are all about the same age.
Yeah,
Probably
or
even more
maybe
than
it
that.
was like right after Obama, probably. Or maybe it was like if you go like without Obama, even like before
Yeah,
that, it
yeah.
was like it's like everyone, like
Well,
even like
Jimmy Carter was. I mean,
old.
he's
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 still
like
alive, I
still,
think,
yeah,
dude.
he's still alive, and he was like he was president like 35, 40 years ago, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's
So,
nuts. All
all
right,
right.
running out of time. We'll end it here. Thanks for watching.